My main tip for efficiency and safety with knives is how you hold it. Most people hold it like this, just with their hand like this. There's a top view. How I recommend holding it and how I learned in culinary school is to hold it like this. So you have a thumb on one side of the blade at the top and holding it like that on the other side. If you're holding it like this to cut, just take it in your hand like that, hold the blade, and move it. I mean, it wobbles. If you do it like that with the thumb there and the pointer finger there, try it again, it is a lot harder to move. It's more of an extension of your hand. You have a lot more control over it. You're not going to have problems with it veering off because of what you're cutting being hard or slippery or whatnot. So that is one of my major tips. Alright, so a basic safety tool with knives is always curl your fingers over. Don't have them like this, because if you're chopping and there's a slip, it's easier to cut yourself this way than if you're doing this. Okay, so always curl your fingers under. It's not natural, so it takes a lot of practice. And of course it's hard on smaller things, but do try. Another one for speed and consistency of size of what you're chopping, and again safety, is not to just lift your knife up and down, but to rock it. So, like this. Okay, so that's one way to go about that. Cutting onions, unless you're going for onion ring style, if you just want strips, like for French onion soup or chopped up for pizza or whatnot, this is a good way to go. This may not be the best example because this was cut earlier this week and it's kind of drying up, but when you cut it, just cut it in half. Leave on the, what is that, a leafy end, I guess, where the foliage came out, and then the root end. Don't chop those off till the very end. So cut it in half, and then I'll take and chop it again, basically. But just try to get it so they stay together, because ultimately you want that to all hold together. Like I said, this is not going to be perfect. Now what you'll do here is lay it on its side, so your root or other end is there, and you will take your knife, and at angles, however big you want it, super thin or chunky, you will slowly cut in. You'll go as close as you can to the edge without actually cutting the way through it, because this way it keeps it all together. Right now these thin movements is basically what we'd call a julienne, right? So I guess I'll just finish that out. Doesn't take that long. There's all sorts of different things that I've heard about cutting onions. If you refrigerate it, help, or I've heard that that's actually hurts. I love wearing contacts while cutting mine versus my glasses, or I use swimming goggles. I've done that before, but it's just the oils that burn your eyes. So anyway, you've got it sliced. I did not do a great job, but whatever. Now if you want them in strips, you know, like that, then you'll just cut off the root end and the whole thing will be in strips. If you want it more of dice, again, curling the fingers, and this is not going to turn out great because my inside layers are all dried out and that, but there you got your smaller chunks, and you just chop it until you get to the end, and then you'll cut off your root, and it will be what you're looking for. And that's a horrible example, so maybe we'll cut that part out. Alright, cutting bell peppers. The first thing that we're going to do is place it on its flat top, or relatively flat top, and chop down, and clear out the core and the pithy membrane, because it's bitter, the seeds are tasteless. Alright, if you still have some, you can pick out the membrane, you can shake out the seeds, or even rinse it out. So, sorry, my board's getting a little messy with just different vegetable stuff. You never want to cut a bell pepper like this, or any pepper, I guess. The skin is slippery, right? It's very smooth, and as well, you'd be cutting into, basically, it would make it crush in on itself, again, making your knife waver and inconsistent size and shape. So always cut it this way, from the inside. I'm just making these for snacking vegetables, so I'm not going to cut them into smaller dice, but, you know, it's just like you would with, I don't know, green onions or carrots or celery. You know, you'd line them up and then chop them up that way, curling your fingers, of course, making sure you're holding your knife properly. But that is bell peppers. Alright, tips on cutting tomatoes. Like the bell peppers, tomatoes have a smooth skin, so, I mean, there's not really an inside that you'd necessarily cut from, but just be careful that you have a sharp knife. A serrated knife helps. Also, sometimes if I'm having problems, I'll kind of pierce the skin with a tip, and that gives me a guide to go in. So that's maybe something you want to try. Now, as for slicing tomatoes, kind of like onions, there's a different way to do it than I think a lot of people know. So most people cut it side to side. Let me do it like you're probably watching. Alright, so top, bottom, side to side. And it makes it nice and beautiful, like for hamburgers, sandwiches. But complaint that I think a lot of us have is these beautiful membranes, which these Roma tomatoes are not a good example, because they actually stay together pretty well. But big, like beefsteak tomatoes, these usually fall out, right? They're on your plate. They're not that delicious, moist goodness in your sandwich. So to avoid that, you simply actually just slice it. I'm trying to reconstruct my tomatoes here, top to bottom. So your top, there's your bottom, slice it that way. And that actually tends to hold in the membranes better. They may not look as pretty or fit nearly as well, quite as well, but that is one technique to get it so it's actually in your food and not left on the plate. Alright, and here's my husband to help with a tip for knife safety. Big thing is how you carry your knife. If you're moving around in the kitchen, you definitely don't want to use it, for example, to point to things. Don't use it casually. It can be deadly. It's considered a weapon in some ways, or a tool. And if you're walking around, someone might be behind you, someone might be coming around the corner. Don't just hold it straight in front of you. Thanks, dear. That can be obviously a big injury. Show me the proper way to hold a knife. Okay, so he knows his grip, and then down to your side, straight down to your side. So that'll be your safest bet, unless you have a toddler screaming at your leg or a dog bouncing at your arm. That's the best way to go.